You know that feeling, right? You're staring down this, like, mountain of information articles, research papers, maybe your own notes all sprawled out.
Yeah.
And all you really want are the essential insights, those aha moments, so you can truly feel informed, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Cutting through the noise.
Exactly. Well, you've definitely come to the right place today. We're doing precisely that for one of philosophy's, well, most ambitious thinkers.
Definitely ambitious.
This isn't just another discussion, it's a deep dive. We're going into the profound and, sometimes kind of dizzying philosophical landscape crafted by Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph von Schelling.
That's Schelling, all right.
We'll be navigating his monumental work, The System of Transcendental Idealism. It's a text published right back in 1800 that, despite its, let's say, initial density,
dense is one word for it,
it unfolds this really breathtaking vision of reality, consciousness, and what he believed was the ultimate key to understanding it all.
Art, yeah. That's crucial for him later.
So our mission today is basically to unpack Schelling's intricate philosophy. We'll be exploring his truly unique ideas about the very nature of the self, the hidden depths of the unconscious, and how existence itself, comes into being.
Big questions.
Huge. And crucially, we're going to trace how his thought builds upon, and sometimes pretty boldly diverges from, the groundbreaking work of his intellectual predecessors. We're talking giants like Immanuel Kant, Johann Gottlieb Fichte.
Can't talk Schelling without Kant and Fichte, that's for sure.
He really carved out his own indispensable place in German idealism, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. A central figure.
So get ready for, maybe a fast track to being truly well-informed on a pivotal moment in German idealism. We're going to try and extract the most important nuggets of wisdom, connect the dots you might not have seen before, and reveal some genuinely surprising facts about how this one mind sought to unify all knowledge. I mean, from the seemingly rigid laws of physics all the way to the sublime beauty of artistic creation.
It's a grand vision, no doubt. A total system.
We're aiming for clear structure, engaging delivery, and insights that we hope will make you look at the world and perhaps even yourself in a totally new light. Let's unpack this odyssey of consciousness.
It's quite the journey we're embarking on, absolutely, into a period of really intense intellectual ferment.
Right.
Schelling's System of Transcendental Idealism, published right there at the turn of the 19th century, 1800, it holds a truly fascinating and, central position in the timeline of German idealism.
Central how?
Well, imagine it as this kind of crucial architectural bridge. It appeared just 7 years after Fichte's foundational Science of Knowledge.
Okay, Fichte first.
And then just 7 years before Hegel's monumental Phenomenology of Spirit.
Hegel after, so it's smack dab in the middle.
Exactly. This isn't just some historical coincidence. It really highlights the work's role as both a brilliant culmination of ideas that came before it and a vital stepping stone to what would follow.
So it's not just a standalone philosophical treatise then, but really a pivotal moment in this sort of philosophical relay race, connecting the groundbreaking ideas that came before with the monumental systems that would later reshape thought. That's a really interesting way to frame its place in history.
Precisely. And while this work brought Schelling, sudden fame and really solidified his position at the pinnacle of German philosophy for about the next decade.
Big deal at the time.
Huge. But it's ironically described by scholars as far from the most original of his writings.
Really? Even though it made him famous?
Yeah. Instead of inventing entirely new principles, it functions more as a work of consolidation. He took the foundational elements of transcendental idealism, first laid out by Kant, the critical stuff,
right,
and then rigorously systematized by Fichte with the focus on the I, and he wove them into a more complete, more expansive tapestry. It's almost like he was showing the full, breathtaking potential of what his predecessors had only just started.
A consolidation, then, rather than a radical departure.
Okay.
But you mentioned it also foreshadows themes that would become central to his later work.
Yes, that's the really fascinating part.
What kind of new directions, what subtle hints were embedded in this work, even as he was busy bringing together these older ideas?
Well, what's truly interesting here is that even in this act of consolidation, the system subtly introduces elements that would later become genuinely characteristic of Schelling's more mature philosophy.
Like what?
For instance, he hints at the reality and ultimacy of nature in an idealistic perspective. That was a significant shift.
How so? Compared to Kant and Fichte?
Well, where Kant and Fichte had primarily focused on the subjective, the self and its activity, Schelling begins to give nature its own weight, its own reality. He sees its function as the ground and anti-type of spirit.
Anti-type of spirit, that's a strong phrase. So nature isn't just a passive backdrop for our minds anymore. It's an active, almost complementary force that helps define spirit. That sounds like a big conceptual move.
It is indeed. He's laying the groundwork here for a much more robust philosophy of nature, something he'd develop much further later on.
Okay, so nature gets its due. What else?
He also foreshadows the self-identity of the absolute within dispersed finite being.
Whoa, okay, break that down.
It suggests a deep underlying unity, that the absolute, this ultimate reality, is somehow present and identical within all the separate finite things and experiences we encounter, a kind of hidden oneness.
A hidden oneness,
Okay.
connecting everything. Got it.
And another key theme, and one we'll definitely explore in depth, is the conceptual, though unconscious element in art. He's hinting here at the profound and unique role art would play in his later thought, seeing it as more than just beauty.
Art having an unconscious conceptual element. Intriguing.
Oh.
And the last one.
And finally, the idea that philosophy's task is constructing a general metaphysics upon the model of human freedom. This is a thread that runs through his entire system, linking human autonomy, our freedom, to the very structure of reality itself.
Freedom is the model for metaphysics.
Wow. Yeah. So these ideas are not fully developed in this system, not yet, but the seeds are clearly and powerfully sown. You can see where he's headed.
Okay, so he's looking to consolidate what came before, definitely, but with a clear eye toward expanding the scope of idealism itself. What was his overarching mission with this grand project, this system of transcendental idealism? What was he really trying to achieve?
Schelling's explicit purpose was nothing less than to enlarge transcendental idealism into what it really should be.
Which was?
Namely, a system of all knowledge.
All knowledge. This is incredibly ambitious.
Oh, completely. And this wasn't just some lofty aspiration. He aimed to provide proof of the system through the real extension of its principles to all possible problems. He wasn't content with just the theory of how we know things. He wanted to demonstrate its applicability to everything.
So everything from like physics to ethics to...
Exactly. From the smallest atom to the grand sweep of history. He wanted to show transcendental idealism could explain it all.
So he wasn't just explaining how our minds operate, but how all reality operates, and what that implies for the very fabric of existence.
Precisely. A central goal for him was to prove the identity of transcendental idealism and real philosophy.
Okay, idealism and real philosophy. What does that mean in practice?
It meant reconciling the subjective realm, our ideas, our consciousness, our internal world, with the objective realm, the external physical world.
The classic mind-body problem, essentially. Or mind-world problem.
Sort of, yeah. He sought to bridge that age-old divide, thereby elevating transcendental philosophy into an ideal realism. He was aiming to show that mind and matter are not two separate, ultimately irreconcilable entities.
Which is how we usually think of them.
Right, but rather two sides of the same coin, or perhaps two manifestations of the same underlying activity.
That idea of ideal realism, bridging the gap between our internal world of thought and the external world of objects, that sounds like a truly monumental challenge. How did he conceive of this system itself in trying to achieve such a comprehensive goal?
This is where we see Schelling in a really fascinating transition, clearly moving beyond Fichte. The concept of system, in the system of transcendental idealism, actually navigates two distinct meanings.
Right.
The first sense, which he inherited directly from Fichte, is an immanent unification of human knowledge under its guiding principle, reflexive self-relation.
Reflexive self-relation.
Meaning, think of it as how knowledge organically builds itself from within, based on the self's own reflections and its inherent activity. It's about the internal consistency of our knowing, how it all hangs together based on the I.
So how the self organizes its own knowing, internally consistent, and self-referential. That makes perfect sense for Fichte, who put the I right at the absolute center.
Yes, exactly. But then Schelling extends us to a second, much broader sense of system,
Which is?
a comprehensive science, a total philosophy comprehending all the different possible perspectives upon reality. This second sense includes the first one, but goes way beyond it.
How so?
It entails paralleling the transcendental system. Our system of knowledge derived from the subjective I with a co-equal system of natural science, a philosophy of nature.
bringing nature back in forcefully.
Right. His ultimate vision even contemplates joining these two systems, the ideal and the real, mind and nature, through a transcendental logic, a metaphysical theory of identity and difference. He saw natural science itself as a necessary part of this total philosophical system.
So the laws of nature aren't external to mind.
Not for Schelling. They're expressions of mind, or rather, expressions of the same underlying activity that produces mind.
So Fichte was like an architect designing this magnificent skyscraper of knowledge, all from the perspective of the individual I, built with perfect internal logic.
Good analogy.
But Schelling comes along and says, that's great, but what about the rest of the city? What about the rivers, the mountains, the other buildings? We need a single grand design that connects the skyscraper to everything else, showing how they're all part of one massive interconnected plan.
A perfect analogy. He aimed for a unified field theory, if you will, for philosophy and all its domains. This grand project was a direct response to the philosophical giants who came before him, building on their insights to create something even more expansive.
And speaking of those giants, let's talk about the foundations he stood upon. Schelling wasn't operating in a vacuum, obviously. He stood firmly on the shoulders of Immanuel Kant and Johann Gottlieb Fichte. What exactly did Kant contribute that Schelling found so vital?
Kant, yeah. With his critical philosophy, he truly laid the groundwork for the entire idealist movement. Schelling recognized that beyond Kant's critical examination of the limits of reason, what reason couldn't do, there was also a positive Kantian philosophy.
Positive how?
In that it pointed directly towards systematic development. Kant wasn't just deconstructing, he was also providing a kind of blueprint, an ideal for what philosophy could be.
So Kant gave them not just the warnings about where reason couldn't go, but also a map, a kind of architectural ideal for where it could build.
Exactly. Take the architectonic section of Kant's critique of pure reason. It laid out the ideal of a systematic form for all philosophy and described philosophy's function as a metascience, a science about other sciences, an overarching framework. This ideal of a unified overarching system deeply influenced Schelling.
Okay, the ideal of system. What else from Kant?
Also, Kant's revolutionary notion of transcendental questioning as a methodology, that was huge.
Transcendental questioning, meaning asking how knowledge is possible.
Precisely, asking not what we know, but how knowledge itself is possible, how our minds structure experience. That was a key inheritance. It fundamentally reshaped philosophical inquiry.
That's the core of it, isn't it? That fundamental shift from what to how. That's where it all really began to transform.
Yes, it truly was revolutionary. And beyond just the methodology, Kant provided a fully positive description of pure reason operating in and for itself as a function of self-relation.
Reason relating to itself.
Yeah. This concept, that pure reason inherently relates to itself, is incredibly important. It suggested an intrinsic activity of mind that wasn't just passively receiving impressions from the world, but actively structuring its own experience. This concept profoundly influenced both Fichte and, subsequently, Schelling.
So Kant provided the blueprint, the methodology, and this initial insight into the self-organizing power of reason.
You could definitely say that. He laid the crucial foundations.
So Kant gave them the blueprint and the foundational tools, but he essentially left them to build the actual structure. And then came Fichte. What was his unique breakthrough, particularly with the concept of the I? What did he add to this philosophical construction site?
Fichte took Kant's insights and, really elevated them dramatically in his Science of Knowledge. He enunciated the principle that the togetherness of subject and object, of presentation and thing, can be founded only in self-consciousness or its constitutive activity, imagination.
Only in self-consciousness.
Yes. And he famously called this unit of consciousness the self, or simply the I. For Fichte, the I wasn't just a point of awareness, but an active, dynamic principle, the ultimate source of all experience.
So everything we perceive, everything we know as an objective world, actually originates from this active I. That sounds like a radical, almost world-creating claim.
It is indeed. Fichte's ambition was nothing less than to demonstrate that the objective world in the totality of its being and its operations is a process of emergence from the self and its activities, most basically presentation.
Wow.
He argued that the entire world, including nature, the sensible world, even the human community living under law, subject to time and history, was to be constructed from the self's fundamental quality, freedom, or activity.
Freedom or activity, that's the key for Fichte.
Absolutely. He saw freedom as the ultimate ground, the very fabric of everything.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible assertion of the self's power, almost making us the creators of our own reality. There's a quote from Schelling where he directly addresses Fichte's idea, emphasizing this, isn't there?
Yes, Schelling explicitly quotes Fichte's really powerful axiom. Freedom is the one principle on which everything is supported.
Yeah.
And what we behold in the objective world is not anything present outside us, but merely the inner limitation of our own free activity.
The inner limitation of our own free activity.
Yes, this highlights the core Fichtean idea that the objective world isn't some alien out there, but rather a self-imposed limitation or maybe a manifestation of our own inherent freedom. It's a profound thought that the very existence of things, of nature, is an expression of our own self-limiting freedom.
That's quite a twist. So the world isn't something we merely encounter, but something that arises from our own deepest activity. And both Fichte and Schelling emphasize the idea of praxis rather than just theory. What does that mean in this context?
Both philosophers definitely granted priority to praxis rather than to theory. What this means is that the philosophical system itself isn't a passive vision of reality, something we just observe or receive. Instead, it's an act of freedom, a free recapitulation of the act of selfhood. The very act of philosophizing, of constructing this system of knowledge, is an active, self-constituting process. It's not merely a description of something already given.
So it's about doing philosophy, not just having a philosophy.
Exactly. The philosopher is not just a spectator, but an active participant in recreating reality and thought.
So the philosopher is not just a spectator, but an active participant in recreating reality and thought, almost like an artist engaging with their material.
That's a good way to put it. And Fichte's science of knowledge provided the methodological guide for all of this.
The how-to manual, almost.
In a way, yes. While Schelling's system of transcendental idealism is a distinct work, Fichte's science of knowledge provided the fundamental methodological and epistemological framework. It was the masterclass in how to rigorously deduce the world from the eye.
Right.
Fichte's genius was in showing how everything could, in principle, be derived from this principle of self-consciousness. But it remained largely an abstract, subjective project.
Focused inward.
Very much so. Schelling's contribution, building on Fichte, is really to give flesh and substance to that abstract principle. He explicitly brings in the natural world in a way Fichte hadn't fully done and shows how the eye manifests as nature itself.
Oh.
He takes Fichte's highly subjective starting point and expands it to encompass the objective, the real, and ultimately, as we'll see, the aesthetic.
That's a crucial distinction. Fichte sets the stage with the abstract eye, and Schelling steps in to populate that stage with a dynamic, living universe, showing how it all springs from the same source. This leads us perfectly into Schelling's own core philosophical concepts, particularly his truly paradoxical view of the self and his groundbreaking insistence on the unconscious. Let's start with this unique conception of the self. What exactly is it for Schelling?
Well, for transcendental philosophy, as Schelling understands it, the subjective, the first and only ground of all reality, is for transcendental philosophy the sole principle of explanation for everything else.
The subjective is the ground.
Yes. This means the starting point is always from within, from our own subjective experience. And it necessarily begins with a general doubt as to the reality of the objective. To truly understand the self, you have to set aside all assumptions about an external world, question everything outside of you.
So pure introspection, stripping away all external assumptions. Radical doubt, then. And what does he find when he performs this radical mental experiment? What is this self, then, if it's not tied to external reality?
The self is described as pure inwardness. It's a process, and only derivatively a being or a state of a being.
A process, not a being.
Primarily, yes. It is infinitely non-objective, non-thing-like, precisely because it is the system principle, the absolute starting point, and must therefore be unconditioned. It's not a static entity you can point to, measure, or describe like an object. It's more like an ongoing, dynamic activity, a boundless current.
So it's not a thing that exists, but an activity that happens. That's a really hard concept for our everyday minds to grasp, because we're so used to defining ourselves by our roles, our bodies, our possessions.
It absolutely challenges our ordinary language and intuition. Schelling highlights this by positing the proposition I am as beyond doubt a higher proposition than I think.
Higher than Descartes, I think.
Yes. While I think expresses a determination, an act of judgment, I am is an infinite proposition with no actual predicate. It doesn't describe what I am, just that I am.
Pure existence.
Exactly. The character of the self consists in this very fact that it has no other predicate than that of self-consciousness. It's pure being, without specific qualities attached at that fundamental level. This isn't just a linguistic game. It suggests that our fundamental existence as being precedes any specific thought or action we might undertake.
It's a profoundly abstract idea, but for someone listening, trying to wrap their head around it,
Yeah.
what's the tangible difference? How does that foundational shift from I think to I am actually change anything in how we understand ourselves or the world beyond just being a philosophical premise?
Right. Well, it changes everything because it puts raw, dynamic activity at the very core of existence. If I am is higher than I think, it means the essence of self is not primarily intellectual, but perhaps more volitional, an act of pure being that gives rise to thought, rather than thought giving rise to being.
Okay.
And he takes this further, saying the self is beyond the usual categories of thing or nothing. He argues that the question of whether the self is a thing in itself or an appearance is itself intrinsically absurd.
Why absurd?
Because, he states bluntly, it is not a thing at all. The traditional dilemma, everything must be either something or nothing, is based on an ambiguity, a false choice when it comes to the self. For Schelling, the concept of doing, or activity, is higher than that of a thing.
Activity is higher than thingness.
Yes, because things themselves are to be understood merely as modifications of an activity limited in various ways. So what we call a thing is just a limited, perhaps temporarily solidified form of activity.
This completely flips our everyday understanding of reality. We intuitively think of objects, of things, as primary, and activity as something those things do. He's saying activity is primary, and things are just its manifestations, like a river is primary, and the eddies and currents are its changing forms.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. For Schelling, one cannot say of the self that it exists precisely because it is being itself.
It is being itself.
Yes, it is the eternal, timeless act of self-consciousness that gives all things existence, and so itself needs no other being to support it. It is self-sustaining, self-grounding existence.
Wow.
And this fundamental self-enactment, this self-constituting activity, is what Schelling calls intellectual intuition.
Okay, intellectual intuition, what exactly is that then? Is it like psychic power?
No, not like that. It's not like seeing with your eyes or reasoning with your mind in the usual sense. It's a direct, unmediated inner knowing of your own fundamental activity. Pure, raw being and doing, before it even takes on specific forms or thoughts.
So a direct knowing.
Imagine a deep internal knowing that you are doing without needing to analyze it, like the feeling of being active at the very core of your existence. It's an absolutely free type of knowing, not arrived at by proofs or concepts, but an intuition of a pure doing.
So it's not like seeing or touching an external object, but a direct internal experience of being and acting as the very source of everything else. A kind of inner knowing that's the foundation of all other knowing.
Yes, exactly. And this self is, therefore, a paradoxical identity.
Paradoxical how?
He describes it as an identity which is not an identity, but a synthesis. A synthesis which is not one synthesis, but many syntheses packed into one. It is at once cause and effect of itself, producer and product, subject and object.
Cause and effect of itself. Producer and product. That's dizzying.
It is. It's a dynamic, self-creating, self-limiting process. And this completely flips our everyday understanding of identity, because as you listen to this, you aren't just a being. You are, in a profound sense, being itself in a state of dynamic, self-creating activity.
That's a truly mind-bending concept. It sounds like the self is less a static noun and more a continuously unfolding dynamic verb.
That's a very good way to capture it.
And now for something that's truly characteristic of Schelling, and frankly feels a bit ahead of his time, his insistence on the unconscious. How does this play into his understanding of the self?
Yes, the unconscious. This insistence upon the unconscious is really the moment really characteristic of Schelling's philosophizing, and most in continuity with the rest of his thought. It's his signature move, you could say.
Okay.
The self, as the system principle, is originally mere activity and not at all circumscribed by self-awareness. It's an energizing performance, not exhausted in intuition.
Not exhausted meaning?
Meaning our conscious self-awareness is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. There's a vast dynamic engine of activity operating beneath the surface, unconsciously.
So this fundamental activity of the self, this pure doing, is mostly operating without our conscious awareness. That's quite a departure from previous idealists who've focused so heavily on conscious thought. It feels almost pre-Freudian.
Absolutely. It's remarkably prescient. He posits that despite coming to light in self-awareness, the self has a paradoxical and dark side, a hidden ground, which is, in fact, its antitype, its opposing counterpart.
A dark side.
Or maybe just hidden. He calls it a knot of pure fact, quite hidden from reason. And this raises a profound question. Is this ineffability, this inability to fully grasp it with reason due to a surpassing character, meaning it's some kind of spiritual transcendence, something higher and richer than consciousness,
Right.
or is it a privative one, a mute, dark ground of activity, something beneath or prior to consciousness? Schelling doesn't fully resolve this ambiguity, but the very notion of a hidden, active ground operating beyond our immediate awareness is crucial to his whole system.
A mystery at the core of being, whether it's a higher, ineffable form of activity or a deeper, unconscious one. And he connects this unconscious activity to the profound concepts of freedom and necessity. How does he square that circle? How can something be both absolutely free and absolutely necessary? That sounds like a contradiction.
It does sound like one. He describes the original act of self-consciousness as absolutely free, since it is determined by nothing outside the self. It just acts from itself.
Okay, free because it's self-caused.
But also absolutely necessary, since it proceeds from the inner necessity of the nature of the self. It couldn't act otherwise given its own nature. Think about maybe God's actions in some theological traditions. They're seen as absolutely free, yet also necessary expressions of God's perfect nature. Schelling uses a similar logic for the self's core activity.
Okay, I think I can see that. Free from external constraint, necessary from internal nature.
Precisely. And this act, he argues, cannot itself occur in time. It's foundational, hence of the rational being. One can no more say that it has begun to exist than that it has existed for all time. The self as self is absolutely eternal, that is, outside time altogether. This fundamental activity of the self transcends temporal categories. It's always already there, always already acting.
So the deepest, most fundamental level of our being operates outside of time and is simultaneously free and necessary. How does philosophy, then, engage with this? Is it simply trying to become conscious of this unconscious process?
Yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it. He describes philosophy itself as nothing else but the free imitation, the free recapitulation of the original series of acts into which the one act of self-consciousness evolves.
Philosophy as imitation.
A free imitation. The philosopher's talent lies in not just repeating these acts in thought, but in again becoming aware of the original necessity of those acts. This process allows us to understand the original series, the real unconscious unfolding of the self and the world through our philosophical copy, the ideal conscious reconstruction.
So philosophy is a kind of reverse engineering of the self's original unconscious creation of reality.
That's a fantastic way to think about it. It's an active, conscious reenactment. This takes us into how Schelling constructs reality through what he calls theoretical philosophy. Given that the world springs from the self, how does he then bridge that fundamental ideal-real paradox, the gap between our internal ideas and an external world that seems so solid and independent? Well, the direction of transcendental philosophy is crucial here. While a nature philosophy might seek to make an intelligence out of nature, proceeding from the objective world.
Starting with rocks and stars.
Right. Schelling's transcendental philosophy does the opposite. It proceeds from the subjective as primary and absolute, and having the objective arise from this. So his starting point is always the subjective I, and the external world has to be deduced from that.
Okay.
But this immediately brings us back to that core philosophical contradiction that has plagued thinkers for centuries.
Right, the fundamental contradiction. How do our internal ideas relate to an external world, and vice versa?
Yeah.
How can they possibly match up?
Exactly. Schelling identifies this as a monumental contradiction that philosophy must resolve. He frames it as two conflicting problems.
Problem A.
Problem A concerns theoretical certainty. It asks, how can our presentations, our thoughts and perceptions, absolutely coincide with objects existing wholly independent of them? This assumes that things are as we perceive them, that our knowledge accurately corresponds to an independent reality.
Okay, how knowledge matches the world. Problem B.
Problem B concerns practical certainty. It asks, how can an objective something in the external world be altered by a mere thought so that it perfectly coincides therewith? This assumes the possibility of free action, where our will, a mere thought, can directly impact and change the external world.
And the conflict is clear. If the world is utterly independent, problem A, how can our thoughts or actions change it? Problem B. And if our thoughts determine the world, problem B, how can it truly be independent? Problem A. It's a classic catch-22.
Precisely. As Schelling puts it, For certainty in theory, we lose it in practice. And for certainty in practice, we lose it in theory. It's a profound dilemma.
Yeah, it really is.
Resolving this contradiction, this question of how can we think both of presentations as conforming to objects and objects as conforming to presentations, is, for him, not the first, but the highest task of transcendental philosophy. He's aiming to reconcile the very basis of knowing with the very possibility of acting freely in the world.
So he's aiming to reconcile knowing with doing, theory with practice, at the deepest level. How does he propose to solve this highest task? What's the magic key?
His ingenious solution lies in realizing that the productive activity that finds expression in willing, that is, our conscious free action, is the very same activity that is productive without consciousness in bringing about the world.
The same activity, conscious willing and unconscious world making.
Yes. This establishes a predetermined harmony and resolves the contradiction. He posits a single underlying activity that manifests both consciously as our free will and unconsciously as the world-making process.
So it avoids the problem of two separate realities.
Exactly. By positing the single underlying activity, what if it's the same deep activity expressing itself in two ways? It's a beautiful, elegant way to bridge that chasm between mind and matter, subjective and objective.
That is elegant. The same deep activity expresses itself in our conscious will and in the unconscious creation of the world. So our will and the world aren't separate, but different aspects of the same underlying process. If that's the case, how does he then derive something as fundamental as sensation and matter from this subjective principle? Where does the stuff of the world come from?
Okay, so to isolate the subjective principle, transcendental philosophy employs absolute skepticism against fundamental preconceptions. This isn't just doubting common prejudices, it's questioning the very notion of an objective admixture into pure knowledge. It's about stripping away all assumptions to find the pure subjective core.
A truly radical doubt, then. Question the most basic things we take for granted about an outside world.
Very radical. So what happens when the self encounters sensation in this purified state, when all external assumptions are stripped away?
Yeah, what is sensation then?
Sensation arises when the self finds in itself something opposed to it, which he describes as a real negation of activity or state of being affected. In sensation, the self is merely the sensed.
A negation of activity, like hitting a boundary.
Sort of. It's not an external input, like a signal hitting a receptor, but an internal experience of limitation within the self's own boundless activity. Schelling strongly argues against an external origin of sensation, stating it is utterly inconceivable how any affection from without can transform itself into a presentation or into knowledge.
So he rejects the idea that something outside causes sensation inside.
Completely. He contends that materialism, the idea that only matter exists, ultimately fails unless it turns matter into the mere modification of an intelligence, which means it has to revert to the intelligent as that which is primary. You always end up back at mind or activity.
So sensations aren't caused by outside objects hitting our senses. They're an internal experience of the self encountering a limit within its own activity. And this ties into his concept of productive intuition. You mentioned that earlier.
Exactly. The reality of sensation depends on the self not intuiting the sensed as self-posited. If it knew it was creating the limit, it wouldn't feel like a limit. The self cannot intuit itself as limited without intuiting this limitation as an affection on the part of a not-self. The marvel of productive intuition allows the self to intuit itself as sensing by simultaneously being limitant, the source of the limitation, and delimited experiencing that limitation.
So the self is both limiting and limited at the same time.
Yes. And the opposition within the self appears to the self as an opposition between itself and something outside it. What appears to be external is actually an internal dynamic, projected outward, so to speak.
That's a crucial twist. What appears to be external is actually an internal dynamic. This leads us to the concrete world. How does he then construct something as solid and tangible as matter itself from these internal dynamics and self-imposed limitations? This is where it gets really interesting.
Right. Schelling deduces matter's construction through 3 dynamic stages, which he also creatively links to physical forces and dimensions known in his time. These aren't just static physical properties, they're expressions of the self's activities manifesting in the objective world.
Okay, stage 1.
The first stage is magnetism, which he says generates length. Here, the 2 opposing forces are united in one and the same point. Think of a magnetic line of force. The positive pole is the seat of both forces, with the negative force acting at a distance, defining direction and extent. It's like the initial push and pull that establishes a basic line, a fundamental dimension, emerging from the initial opposition within the self's activity.
So magnetism gives us the first dimension, length, from this basic opposition. What comes next, building on that?
The second stage is electricity, which creates breadth. In this stage, the two forces are parted from each other. The expansive force, now free to spread out, forms angles with the line of length, creating a surface. Electricity, unlike magnetism, spreads over a surface rather than acting solely along a line. So we move from a one-dimensional line to a two-dimensional plane from the separation and spreading of these forces.
Okay, length from magnetism, breadth from electricity, leads to the third dimension.
Exactly. The third stage is the chemical process, which adds depth or interpenetration. Here, the two bodies in a chemical process represent only the original opposition of the two forces, but now they mutually interpenetrate. This achieves genuine interpenetration, adding the third dimension.
Yeah, through chemical interaction.
Right. And he mentions galvanism, which was cutting-edge science then, showing electricity causing chemical reactions as the general expression for all processes that transform into a product. It encompasses these dynamic forces and brings matter to its full three-dimensional reality.
So magnetism, electricity, and chemistry aren't just random phenomena in the world, but fundamental, progressively complex manifestations of the self's underlying activity, building up the dimensions of matter.
That's precisely his argument.
What's truly profound here, for you listening, is that Schelling isn't just giving us a quirky 1800s physics lesson. He's showing us how even the most basic physical forces are expressions of this self-creating activity. Think about it. The very desk you're sitting at, the air you breathe, it's not just inert stuff, it's mind, it's consciousness, in a different congealed state. It fundamentally redefines how you see the physical world, stripping away that old mind-body split right at its foundation.
Exactly. This deduction leads directly to his profound insight that matter is indeed nothing else but mind viewed in an equilibrium of its activities.
Mind in equilibrium.
Yes. This elimination of all dualism between mind and matter resolves many bewildering inquiries, seeing matter as mind in a condition of dullness, or, conversely, mind as matter merely in becoming.
Mind is dull matter, matter as becoming mind.
It means physics itself, in Schelling's view, reveals the dynamic, active nature of consciousness. Even seemingly inert matter is a manifestation of the self. That phrase he uses, matter is congealed mind, truly encapsulates his vision.
Matter is congealed mind. That's a powerful and incredibly memorable phrase. It completely changes how we think about the physical world. And it's not just matter. He extends this dynamic subjective origin to fundamental concepts like space, time, and causality too.
He does. He argues that space is nothing else but objectified outer sense, and time nothing else but objectified inner sense.
Objectified sense.
Meaning these fundamental forms of experience aren't external givens. They're not just out there waiting for us to perceive them. Rather, they are projections or objectifications of our own internal sensory capacities, ways our mind structures its experience of the world. What holds for space and time is true for outer and inner sense themselves.
So space and time are fundamentally subjective constructs that we project onto the world. We don't find them, we create them in our very act of perceiving. And he relates this to intensity and extensity. What's that about?
Yes. The object itself is outer sense determined by inner. Extensity, which is basically spatial size, is determined by intensity, which he equates with force or energy.
Size determined by force.
Yeah. So how large or widespread something appears spatially, extensity, is determined by its inner power or dynamic energy, intensity. Intensity and extensity are mutually determined by each other. This dynamic interplay of inner and outer sensing, of force and extension, is what constitutes an object for us.
Okay. And space and time themselves are intuitions.
Both space and time are intuitions of the self. They become objects to the self through a production, meaning the self must start producing again in a kind of second producing, an act of the self reflecting on its own intuition that makes them appear objective to us.
This sounds very much like Kant's ideas of space and time as forms of intuition, the spectacles through which we see the world. But Schelling seems to be giving them a more dynamic, active role directly tied to the self's productive activity, not just passive forms.
That's a good distinction. It's more active in Schelling, more directly produced.
What about causality, the idea of cause and effect? How does that arise from the self?
For Schelling, the succession in the causal relation is a necessary one. There's no arbitrary succession. Cause necessarily leads to effect. This process separates substance, that which persists through change, from accident, that which changes making them distinct objects for the self.
Substance and accident, okay.
We then introduces reciprocity. Through reciprocity, succession is fixated. It becomes present. This restores the simultaneity of substance and accident. Cause and effect are seen as mutually determining, locked in a dynamic interplay rather than just a simple A causes B linear chain.
So rather than a simple linear chain, it's a dynamic, interconnected web where things mutually influence each other in the present moment.
Indeed. The categories of relation, substance, and accident, cause and effect, reciprocity, are fundamental to how our minds structure reality. He notes, echoing Kant's table of categories, that the first two in each group are always opposed to each other, and that the third is the union of them both. This reflects his own dialectical approach.
Okay, thesis, antithesis, synthesis again.
Exactly. And through these categories, he arrives at a really profound idea. Nature as absolute synthesis.
What does that mean?
All substances are combined into one, which is in reciprocity only with itself, forming the idea of nature as an absolute totality. Nature becomes this grand, self-contained, self-regulating system. This fixates all involuntary succession.
That's a grand vision of nature as a unified, self-contained system. But if the intelligence, the individual self, my consciousness, intervenes at a specific point in this succession, doesn't that create a contradiction with this absolute totality? How can I be free within a total system?
It does seem to, and Schelling resolves this by distinguishing between absolute intelligence and finite intelligence.
Absolute versus finite.
The absolute synthesis of the universe, the whole system of nature, is not determined by the individual finite intelligence like you or me. The individual merely views it, interacts with it from a particular point. Our finite intelligence enters into an already existing, absolutely synthesized universe.
So the universe isn't my creation, but the creation of the absolute intelligence. And I'm just a part of it.
Essentially, yes. And this also applies to our understanding of the past. He says, the past exists only through the present, and so exists for everyone as such only through his own original restrictedness.
The past only exists through the present.
Yeah. The idea of a past in itself, an objective past, independent of any present consciousness, is as transcendent and unknowable as Kant's thing in itself. So even our experience of the past is filtered, or rather constituted, by our present individual perspective.
So even the past is filtered, or rather constituted, by our present individual perspective. That's a radical view of time. And how does he integrate organic nature living things into this grand framework of the self and its activities?
Organic nature is seen as a symbol of the intelligence.
A symbol.
Meaning it embodies the same principles of self-organization and activity that characterize intelligence itself. It is unceasingly at once both cause and effect of itself.
Like a plant growing from a seed producing seeds.
Exactly. Think of a self-sustaining ecosystem or a living organism constantly renewing itself. It's self-reverting succession, statically represented, a dynamic process that appears stable over time. The intelligence itself, he says, is an endless endeavor towards self-organization.
Mind strives to organize itself, like life does.
Right. Life, which is common to all organic nature, is the condition under which the intelligence can distinguish itself as the stable subject, the I, from the succession of events happening to it. Even our feelings of sickness and health depend on the identity or loss of identity between our intelligence and our organism.
Mind and body connection again.
Very much so. And finally, coming back to freedom, for free activity to be possible, there must be a pre-established harmony between the intelligence, which is freely active, and its unconscious intuition, which constructs the body and world.
Pre-established harmony. Like Leibniz.
Similar idea, yeah. This explains why free movement in its organism, our demeanor, speech, body language, naturally corresponds to our voluntary presentations, our thoughts and intentions. It's an underlying unity of mind and body, conscious and unconscious, that allows our freedom to be effective in the world.
This pre-established harmony, then, offers a profound understanding of how our physical existence and our conscious intentions are interwoven in a truly unified vision. It means our very physics, our very biology, is revealing the dynamic, active nature of consciousness. Even seemingly inert matter is a manifestation of the self.
It's a complete picture he's painting.
This grand synthesis now sets the stage for how Schelling tackles the even bigger questions of human freedom, the arc of history, and what he considers the ultimate apex of philosophy. Art. This is all covered in his practical philosophy, right?
That's right. Practical philosophy for Schelling truly begins with absolute abstraction, which he sees as the beginning of consciousness in time.
Absolute abstraction, like pulling back from the world.
Yes, a kind of withdrawal into the self. This foundational act is explained only through self-determining, or an act of the intelligence upon itself. It's a spontaneous, self-initiated moment of conscious being, an intelligence choosing to act upon itself to become conscious.
So consciousness truly begins with an act of the self determining itself.
Yeah.
And this self-determination is linked directly to willing, to our will.
Yes, willing is presented as the complete solution to our problem of how the intelligence recognizes itself as intuiting. The self, at its core, is a primordial willing. It's through the act of willing that the intelligence becomes aware of itself as the intuitant, the active knower.
Willing makes us aware of ourselves as knowers.
But there's a paradox here, too. An act of the intelligence must be both explicable, it has a reason or a ground, it makes sense within the system, and inexplicable. It's fundamentally free, not simply caused by something external.
Both explainable and unexplainable.
Yeah. This contradiction is mediated by the concept of a demand. The conditions for willing's possibility of the situation, the options are generated unconsciously by the system, but the willing itself remains free. So the drive or the context to will might be unconscious, but the actual act of willing is consciously free.
I see. So the deeper impulse or situation might be unconscious, but the actual choice, the act of willing, remains free. This sounds like it sets up how individual intelligences interact with each other. If my will is primary, how can I interact with other wills without violating their freedom?
Good question. It does lead there. Schelling asserts that direct influence between intelligences is impossible.
We can't beam thoughts into each other's heads.
Right. We can't directly read or control another person's mind. Instead, there is an indirect influence via that pre-established harmony in regard to the common world which they present.
The shared world again.
Yes. This consilience, the natural agreement or convergence among our presentations of the world, is rooted in our common nature, or from the identity both of our primitive and also of our derived restrictedness. Our shared reality, grounded in the same absolute intelligence and its laws, allows for meaningful interaction, even if we can't directly impact each other's minds.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're all playing on the same field, built by the same underlying rules of consciousness, and that's how we can interact and share a common world. And individuality plays a role in this too. How does my uniqueness factor in?
Absolutely. Individuality is linked to a negation of activity within the self, a specific limitation or passive aspect. This exposes it to alien influence as such. Our passivity is the condition for the activity which I intuit outside me. What appears as another's activity impacting us is often possible because of a corresponding passivity or limit within our own being.
So my limits allow others to affect me.
In a way, yes. And this is where artifacts come in as important mediators.
Artifacts, like tools or art.
Exactly. Objects that express the concept of the concept. Things clearly made with intention, like artworks, tools, or written language, push our reflection immediately to an intelligence outside itself. They provide a pathway to recognize something absolutely independent of our own production. They signify another's conscious design, making visible the activity of another mind.
That's a clever way to bridge individual consciousnesses through the objects they create, giving us a tangible way to infer other minds are real and active. And ultimately, he says the world becomes objective through our free action. How does that work?
Yes, the world becomes objective to us through our free action. What appears as an act changing the world is in itself an intuition merely. Our conscious activity, while appearing to change an external world, is fundamentally an act of intuition within the larger, harmonized system of consciousness. Our actions confirm and solidify the reality of the shared world.
So our moral choices and interactions are not isolated events.
Not at all. They are part of a larger, harmonized system of consciousness that gives reality and objectivity to the world we share. That's a powerful connection between our individual will and the objective world.
Moving beyond individual action and interaction now, how does Schelling view history itself in this grand scheme? Is it just a series of random events, battles and kings, or something more purposeful?
For Schelling, history is far from just a random series of events. It's conceived as a progressive, gradually self-disclosing revelation of the absolute.
History is revelation.
Yes, it has a purpose, a trajectory, a hidden logic unfolding over time. The primary characteristic of history, and indeed the supreme problem of transcendental philosophy itself, is to show the union of freedom and necessity, how freedom is to be necessity and necessity freedom.
That sounds like another profound contradiction, maybe the biggest one yet.
Yeah.
How can our free choices also be necessary? Don't they cancel each other out? How can history be both free and determined?
It's the core tension. This is reconciled by positing that an unconscious lawfulness again prevails in the arbitrary, that is, wholly lawless actions of men.
Unconscious lawfulness and arbitrary action.
Yes. So even our most chaotic, seemingly unscripted actions, the everyday choices of billions of people throughout time, are somehow part of a hidden, necessary design. The objective factor in history isn't an intuition of the individual, rather it's an intuition of the species, or maybe of the absolute itself working through the species. An absolute synthesis resolves all contradictions beforehand, so that the chaotic interplay of individual freedoms ultimately contributes to a larger necessary pattern, guiding history towards its ultimate revelation.
So even our most chaotic, seemingly unscripted actions are part of a hidden, necessary design guiding history. Does he see a specific pattern or progression in this historical revelation then?
He does. He outlines 3 historical periods, grounded in the interplay of destiny and providence, with nature acting as a kind of transition between them.
Okay, period 1.
The first period is that wherein the ruling power still operates as destiny, i.e. as a wholly blind force, which coldly and unwittingly destroys even what is greatest and most splendid. This is the tragic period. Think of ancient Greek tragedy. He points to the downfall of the glory and the wonder of the ancient world, where humanity grappled with forces seemingly beyond its control or understanding.
Destiny, a blind force, then nature.
Following this is nature, which serves as a transition period, perhaps a time where natural law seems dominant, leading humanity towards a more ordered understanding, moving away from pure fate.
And the final period, providence, sounds like it brings the conscious element back into play, revealing the purpose behind it all.
Indeed. The third period of history will be that wherein the force which appeared in the earlier stages as destiny or nature has evolved itself as providence.
Providence, like divine guidance.
Sort of. It's where it will become apparent that even what seemed to be simply the work of destiny or nature was already the beginning of a providence imperfectly revealing itself. Everything, even the tragedy, was part of the plan unfolding.
It all had a purpose.
Right. And he makes a truly startling statement about this final period. When this period will begin, we are unable to tell. But whenever it comes into existence, God also will then exist.
God will then exist, not before.
It's a radical statement. This isn't a theological claim in the traditional sense, perhaps, but rather a philosophical one. It suggests that the full conscious manifestation of the complete unity of freedom and necessity in a self-aware whole will only be realized at that future point in history. History, for Schelling, is the unfolding revelation, the gradual becoming of a divine plan, driven by an inherent logic.
That's a bold vision, positing that a kind of ultimate realized divinity will exist when history reaches its ultimate goal. But he also suggests this ultimate goal is an eternal article of faith. It's not guaranteed.
Exactly. The final attainment of this goal can neither be inferred from experience, nor be theoretically demonstrated a priori, but will be only an eternal article of faith to man as he acts and works. It's something we strive towards, a guiding ideal that we believe in and work towards through our actions, rather than a foregone conclusion that can be proven scientifically or philosophically.
So we have to act as if it's achievable.
Precisely. And regarding our individual freedom within this, he states that freedom choice, our everyday experience of choosing, is an appearance of the absolute will. The absolute will itself transcends freedom, being the source of all law, the necessary ground. So while our individual choices feel free in a finite sense, they are manifestations of a deeper, more necessary absolute will that underlies all existence.
Wow. Schelling provides such a grand narrative for history, elevating human actions, even seemingly chaotic ones, into part of a cosmic unfolding, guided by a hidden logic towards a state of ultimate reconciliation.
It's a breathtakingly ambitious synthesis of freedom and necessity.
A truly profound narrative indeed, linking our smallest choices to a universal design. And this brings us finally to what Schelling considers the ultimate apex of philosophy, the universal organ of philosophy itself: art. How does art play this crucial, almost divine role in his system? It seems like the capstone to everything.
It really is the capstone. The ultimate challenge for Schelling, after laying all this groundwork, is to explain how the self itself can become conscious of the original harmony between subjective and objective. We've established this profound underlying harmony, theoretically.
Right. The predetermined harmony, the same activity.
But how do we experience it? How do we come to know it intuitively, not just conceptually? Where can we actually see this unity?
Good question. Where do we see it?
The solution, he argues, lies in how nature appears as a product that is purposive without being purposively brought about.
Nature again. Purposive without purpose.
Exactly. Nature exhibits incredible design and purpose. Think of the intricate balance of an ecosystem, the elegance of a snowflake, the structure of an organism. Yet it doesn't seem to have a conscious creator in the way a human artist does. It seems to operate via a blind mechanism, yet is purposive through and through. This contradiction, he argues, is utterly inexplicable in any system except that of transcendental idealism.
So nature, by itself, hints at a deeper purpose, a hidden intelligence. But it doesn't reveal it consciously or directly. It's like a beautiful object we don't fully understand the meaning of.
Precisely. It points towards the harmony but doesn't fully reveal it to our consciousness.
What then bridges that gap for the self, allowing us to grasp this harmony intuitively?
This is precisely where art enters. Schelling identifies the intuition of art as the special intuition required to solve this puzzle. Art, he proclaims, is the universal organ of philosophy.
The universal organ of philosophy.
Yes. It's the faculty, the tool, that makes the ultimate ground of harmony objective to the self. It's not just a reflection of reality or an expression of feeling. It's a direct, intuitive way to grasp reality's deepest, most harmonious structure.
Universal organ of philosophy. That's a huge claim. It's saying art isn't just decoration or entertainment. It's the vehicle for ultimate truth. It's where philosophy actually happens, in a way.
It's an incredible assertion, yes. That's exactly what he's saying.
How does an art product, a painting or a sculpture or a piece of music, achieve this monumental task? How could it be the organ of philosophy?
The art product, unlike other phenomena like natural objects or products of mere craft, is uniquely positioned to do this. It is both consciously brought about like a product of human freedom and intention, the artist's deliberate choices.
The skill, the technique.
Right. And it's also unconsciously brought about like a product of nature, where deeper, unforeseen meanings and connections emerge, often beyond the artist's own full understanding.
Conscious technique meets unconscious depth.
Exactly. He contrasts it with nature and freedom's products. While nature begins as unconscious and ends as conscious, a blind mechanism gradually revealing purpose to our study in art, the self must begin subjectively with consciousness and end without consciousness or objectively. The artist consciously creates using skill and intellect, but the art itself takes on an objective meaning, an infinite depth that goes far beyond the artist's full conscious intent.
That reminds me of how artists often say their work takes on a life of its own, revealing things even to them, sometimes long after it's finished. This connects to what he calls unconscious infinity.
Exactly. The defining characteristic of a true work of art for Schelling is its unconscious infinity. Beyond the artist's conscious plan or message, an infinity of meaning is depicted, which no finite understanding is capable of developing to the full. The work is capable of being expounded ad infinitum.
Interpreted forever.
Yes. Think of a timeless myth, a great novel, or a classical symphony. Their layers of meaning seem inexhaustible, always revealing something new, resonating differently across centuries, far beyond what any single individual could consciously embed. This makes art a gateway to infinite interpretations and meaning, a window into the absolute itself.
So art isn't just a finite creation, it's a gateway to infinite interpretations and meaning, a window into the absolute. And this connects to the artistic drive itself. Why do artists create?
Aesthetic production, he argues, stems from a feeling of an infinite contradiction within the artist, perhaps the conflict between the subjective ideal and objective reality, freedom and necessity, conscious and unconscious.
That core tension again.
Right. And the creative act resolves this tension into a feeling of an infinite tranquility through creation. Artists are involuntarily driven to create to reconcile this inner conflict. And that unexpected concurrence of the unconscious with the conscious activity, that magical moment where intent and something deeper align, is the very essence of genius.
Genius is where conscious and unconscious meet.
Precisely. The product of art is the product of genius, which reconciles an infinite opposition in a finite product. Art is the one everlasting revelation of this concurrence, a true marvel, showing us how the conscious and unconscious, the subjective and objective, freedom and necessity, can perfectly align in a single object.
So genius isn't just skill, it's this unique ability to tap into the unconscious, to reconcile those fundamental contradictions in a concrete, beautiful creation. And how does this make art superior to science in revealing these ultimate truths? That's a bold claim, putting art above science.
It is bold. He says, science at its highest level has one and the same business as art. Both seek ultimate truth, the underlying harmony. But, he argues, this business, owing to the manner of effecting it, is an endless one for science, so that one may say that art constitutes the ideal of science, and where art is, science has yet to attain to.
Art is the ideal of science.
Yes. For Schelling, genius is problematic in science. A scientific discovery, like Newton's laws, could theoretically be arrived at mechanically through endless calculation and data collection, even if a genius like Newton had a flash of insight. The method is, in principle, repeatable.
Okay.
But in art, the reconciliation of infinite contradiction is simply and solely possible through genius. You can't derive a masterpiece algorithmically. Art offers a direct, intuitive grasp of this harmony, an instantaneous aha moment of unity that science can only endlessly approximate through analysis and deduction.
That's a fascinating distinction. Art provides the instantaneous aha moment of reconciled contradiction that science labors towards through endless calculation and approximation. And this capacity for artistic creation, this poetic gift, he identifies with imagination.
Yes. The poetic gift, which he defines as the capacity to think and couple contradictions to bring disparate elements into a unified whole, is the primordial intuition, identified directly with imagination itself. Imagination is the power that sees the unity in opposition.
Imagination is the core philosophical tool.
And with this, Schelling famously declares, what we speak of as nature is a poem lying pent in a mysterious and wonderful script.
Nature is a poem?
Yes. And through art, through aesthetic intuition, we recognize in nature the odyssey of the spirit. Nature, to the artist's eye, is the ideal world appearing under permanent restrictions, the same spirit that is free in us, but bound in nature's laws.
That's truly beautiful. Nature is a poem waiting to be read through the lens of art, echoing the spirit's journey. This brings his entire system full circle, doesn't it? From the abstract self, through nature, history, and ultimately landing on art as the key.
Absolutely. The entire philosophical system is led back to its starting point. The ultimate ground of all harmony between subjective and objective, that predetermined harmony we talked about, is finally revealed through art.
So art makes the harmony visible, tangible.
Exactly what intellectual intuition is for the philosopher. That rare, direct, immediate grasp of the self's pure activity aesthetic intuition is for everyone else. It is intellectual intuition given universal currency, or become objective, accessible in every consciousness through the experience of art.
Art makes intellectual intuition objective and universal.
Yes. He concludes, the one field to which absolute objectivity is granted is art. It is art that makes the absolute identity, the ultimate harmony between mind and world, freedom and necessity, conscious and unconscious, accessible and evident to all. It's the final, highest revelation.
Wow. From the individual abstract I to the concrete dynamic world of matter, through the purposeful unfolding in history, and finally to the universal unifying power of art. We've really taken a deep dive into Schelling's monumental system of transcendental idealism.
We certainly have.
We've traced his ambitious project to unite the subjective and objective, building on the critical groundwork of Kant and the self-focused idealism of Fichte. We've seen how he reimagined the self, not as a static entity, but as pure dynamic self-creating activity.
That primordial willing.
And introduced the profound significance of the unconscious in shaping both our minds and the very fabric of nature itself.
The journey through his theoretical philosophy, deducing matter and space, and his practical philosophy, looking at freedom and history, really reveals a mind obsessed with seeking unity, explaining everything from a single unified principle, showing us how deeply interconnected our internal world is with the external.
And perhaps the most striking, the most aha moment, for me at least, is Schelling's assertion that art is not just a beautiful pastime or a mere reflection of human culture. For him, art is the universal organ of philosophy, the ultimate means by which the hidden harmony of consciousness in the world reveals itself.
It elevates art to an epistemological peak.
It really does. It's a profound thought that matter itself is congealed mind, and the entire universe, a vast, unfolding poem waiting to be understood aesthetically.
It's an invitation, really, to look at the world, and especially at art, in a fundamentally different way, a way that might reveal a deeper truth.
And that leads us perfectly to a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to ponder. If art holds the key to unlocking the deepest truths of reality, if it's the very organ through which the absolute reveals its harmony, what does that mean for how we engage with it?
How should we approach art, then?
Right. When you stand before a great painting or get lost in a piece of music or are simply struck by the breathtaking beauty of a natural landscape, which he also saw as a kind of unconscious art. Are you merely experiencing human creativity or just pretty natural phenomena?
Or is this something more?
Or are you perhaps glimpsing the unconscious infinity of the absolute itself, resonating with the very act of universal creation? What poems in nature or your own experience are waiting for you to perceive their deeper, harmonious meaning, maybe through that aesthetic intuition Schelling talks about?
It's a powerful question to sit with. This deep dive is, of course, just the beginning with a thinker like Schelling. We hope it sparked your curiosity to explore these profound connections further, whether through philosophy, art, or simply by observing the world around you with, perhaps,